weeks away, days burn, disintegrate, years roll along and fade. Don't let them slip away. Right here, right now, today. These are the good old days. Right here, right now, today. Hey, these are the good old days.
Well, good evening and welcome to Go Figure. And we are excited tonight. We're going to get right into it. Joining me is my brother-in-arms and a big part of the MOTU team is Xazyl, usually from Sergeant Slaughterhouse, but it looks like he's coming from Valhalla today. Everything's...
Oh no, my phone fell over. We're having technical difficulties.
Also, as we're talking MOTU tonight, there's no better man out there to talk to MOTU with than Spectre Creative Scott Neitlich himself. Welcome to the show, sir. How are you doing tonight?
I'm in a show. I'm in a box. Hi, thanks for having me.
I'm excited. This has been a long time in the works. I've had this project in mind, and then I was like, can we kind of put icing on the cake? And I thought talking to you guys about MOTU 87 and what could have been would be a fun way to do it.
You know, I had a He-Man cake when I think I was 7. So.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, very familiar with icing and He-Man cakes. Let's do it.
I love it. I love it. Let's just say a quick hello to see who's joining us in the chat here. So it's going to be a good party because my man Gaz is here. And
hey, Gaz.
It is after dark, so Gap showed up. And Jim Largo's here. How you doing, sir? The rest of the Mo Tuesday crew is Phil. Phil, good to see you, my friend. Oh, we got Better Ray Bob is here. He's tuning in. The best video game streamer out there, TJC, is here.
TJC.
Joe Entel is right here. He's back for more action. Nolan's here. We've got some legends in the chat today. So guys, we're talking MOTU 87. So I want to ask you a question. VHS or the theater? How did you first see this movie? Scott, we'll start with you.
Oh, I definitely saw it in the theater. But the only memories I definitely have are Blade's whip and walking out being like, that wasn't really He-Man.
Yeah.
I remember leaving the theater being like, really? Wow, that was He-Man's movie? Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, I didn't see the theater.
Okay.
Well,
Xazyl, you threw
I don't
VHS.
I don't have any memories of seeing it in the theater, although I'm almost certain I would have had it shown here. But I definitely watched the heck out of the VHS. In fact, one of the VHS stories that I like to tell is that I used to play on the floor with my He-Man toys while the movie was playing in the background. And one time during this play, I let the credits roll and the music, and everything while I kept playing. And that was the first time that I'd ever seen that after credit scene with Skeletor. And as a kid, I thought I'd seen this movie top to tail, right? So this seemed new. And it seemed like, how could something new pop up on a VHS? So I was freaked out. So in my underwear, I ran out to the front yard and stayed out there until Mum got home from the shops. And I was a little embarrassed to tell her I was scared of Skeletor coming up out of the VHS. Anyway.
I was as big a He-Man fan as you could imagine as a kid. So when this movie came out, I was 6. So I was born in 81. So I was right prime He-Man age, but lived in this very, very small town. And so I wasn't even aware there was a movie. Like I hadn't seen any previews for it. The only thing I'd seen were the figures in the store and coming from the He-Man movies. So I was just like, oh, maybe eventually there's going to be, I didn't know it was like out. But a friend of ours down the road had one of like the 80s, the massive satellite dishes where like it'd take their whole backyard to have a satellite dish.
Right.
And he just said, hey, do you want to come over and watch the He-Man movie? And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, I got it on the satellite dish. And I was like, what? And so like ran and we taped it. And then we made his dad made a copy of the tape for me. So
cool.
Going in blind, I was like very much like, well, I was kind of half Xazyl, half Scott. I was like, this is not what I expected from a He-Man movie, but also like it's telling me it's He-Man, so I guess I got to buy in. And if I love He-Man, I guess I got to love this movie. And I guess I was brand loyal even then to what was going on. But yeah, there was some big differences going on with what it was.
Yeah.
Right. And now it's kind of, this movie's kind of become like a, I don't know if I say this right, but it's kind of a joke in the MOTU community. It's this like almost like a scar on the legacy of the vintage MOTU, and kind of like the nail in the coffin for the '87 decline of the line. But is it nostalgia or just our collector nature? Scott, you can speak to this. You've done the research that when the MOTU movie figures come out by Super 7 and then by Masterverse, guys went crazy for them. So is it that we actually liked this movie and just pretended we didn't?
I mean, things, kind of like a fine wine or cheese kind of get better with time, especially when it's linked to your childhood. And, it's like you're not necessarily buying into the film as much as the experience and the memories of it. The fact that you don't see, 87 He-Man toys being sold, like in mass retail is kind of proof that, like, yeah, for us who grew up with it, for collectors, yeah, it's really cool to get, an 87 Skeletor or, Evelyn or whatever. But
right.
Yeah, there's no, like, I'm just trying to go back to your exact, the phrasing of your question, that, what's the research? And it's like, yeah, very small, community that is into it, and enough to support high priced online figures,
Right.
no stock there. And I love the fact that we're in an age where there are companies like Super 7 that are doing, these like obscure ultimate versions of our figures we had as kids. Like, that could never live at retail. So it's cool that there's a company doing that.
So before we get into the whole what if scenario, Scott, we can ask you, which I can rarely ask people, a real life question is, how hard did you push to get them in the classics line when you were doing it?
Well, I guess you could say I did push, but it was like pushing against a mountain. I met with William Stout and Gary Goddard, talking to them about it, and it was really a licensing issue, if anything. Warner Brothers, I think, had the rights to the movie. Probably still do. I think they bought Carico, right? And we couldn't come up with a scenario that would justify the minimum guarantee to get the license. In other words, let's just say the minimum guarantee was $100,000. We tried all these scenarios. Okay, if we made, these 6 figures and sold, 10,000 units of these, and, did a deluxe this and that, and could we make them? And we just couldn't. Like there was no market. So the other issue, and I don't think people realize, like the Super 7 figures were not from the movie. They were not 1987 He-Man. They were based on Williams' concept art.
Right.
So those figures weren't licensed from Warner Brothers. It was like a weird workaround, and Mattel would never do that because they don't want people doing that to their IP. So they're not going to look for weaselly ways. But it's cool that Super 7 did. Super 7 is the company that can do kind of like a weaselly contract like that, and it worked, sort of. Yeah, no, it was when those came out, guys, people in my community went nuts for them. Like, this is what we've always wanted. And I was like, you're making fun of it yesterday, right? And I think I said, you're making fun of it yesterday, and now you can have it. You're like, this is what we always wanted. Oh yeah, I bought a Marvel Legends Frogman figure a year ago. You buy things sometimes just because they're especially with toys. I think that because they're so crazy, it's I have to own them. That exists. Oh my God, Wonder Pig is a thing. I need to buy that.
Right.
Yeah, I think they hit that on the head with the matches of the WWE when they did that crossover between those two lines, and the MOTU wrestling figures. That people were like, this is just so bizarre. I can't not buy these.
Exactly. Yeah. I've absolutely been guilty of buying toys, and I'm like, I'm not into that character, but that is just such a good looking toy or I can't like there was a Funko Pop of the Kool-Aid Man that was like
Right.
oversized, and I had to get just because like it looked like you could just put it on a shelf with action figures, and it looked like the Kool-Aid Man had just like burst through the wall. And I was like, that's awesome. Like I know that was never something I planned on buying, but sometimes
it's funny you mentioned that. Well, I am adamantly not a Funko Pop buyer. Like they're like the opposite of the kind of toys that I like. But this character right here gave me a Sergeant Slaughter Funko Pop for Christmas. So now I have to have one in the collection. Like now it's there kind of mocking me like, you got one. But my buddy Taverko was over yesterday and he's like, oh, Funko Pops are the worst. Except the Kool-Aid Man. I'd buy that one right now because he's the same thing. It's oversized and it looked like it should have looked.
Right, yeah. Like it doesn't look as much like a pop. It actually looks like because of the nature of the character. But yeah, I'm not a huge Funko Pop fan. I probably have like maybe 5 in total scattered about. But usually for characters like the Kool-Aid Man that you can't get any other way. I think I have Grimace because nothing can stop it.
Fantastic. So we're gonna time travel back to '87 together, the three of us, in our minds, if only. And so there's the famous, not famous, maybe it's famous to people that super care about MOTU, but that the '87 wave that came out that was quick to market because it was just reused parts. It was the Scareglow and King Randor wave, which was kind of the last one, right? They did those figures and they did some like crazy ones too, like Twistoid and Rotar and whatnot. And the movie figures were in that same wave. So going back, if we were working for Mattel, living the dream, if you will, what would we do different if we could to fully embrace the movie? Like you've talked a lot of times, Scott, about the rebranding of cards, like the Power of the Force green card versus the orange card to kind of refresh it at retail, right? And but back when MOTU was happening, there was no like history of action figures. It was all brand new, so that history wasn't there. Do you guys think, and we can talk about how we do it, if instead of that Randor Scareglow wave, we could still have those figures, but the card backs were changed to be more of a space theme to go with the movie, and there was like a movie He-Man and a movie Skeletor, and then the other figures that came out, and then like let's say they did the Gray Skull like I did in my video, which was fun. Do you think that would have injected some more life into the line? Do you think that would have given kids the Skeletor and He-Man they needed at retail that they didn't get?
I mean, that was what they were going for, granted. I mean, they actually did do a movie He-Man and Skeletor. It was the Laser Light figures. They just when the movie bombed, instead of calling them from the movie, they just said, "Oh, this is just Laser Power He-Man." But you look at that and it's clearly like the head is is closer to Dolph Lundgren than Filmation. So that was the plan. I mean, the plan was to fully embrace the movie and let the movie, be, as you said, that was kind of like if the movie was made today, the toys would already would be on the shelf day and date. But the idea that like a He-Man movie came out and almost didn't have a big toy line is almost like, really? But neither did the Ninja Turtle movie, if you think about it, when it came out.
No,
True.
Back then, they weren't. It just wasn't as tightly knit, and they were. And just to back up your point, they were doing a rebranding in '87. It was going to be the Powers of Grayskull, the hero.
right?
So it was basically between adding Hero and Eldor, Eternia, and the movie that was supposed to be the '87 line and give the line new juice. The whole problem is, I think you mentioned even in the video, is you couldn't get the core characters, the ones from the cartoon, the ones from '82. And that was actually what retailers asked for. They went to Mattel and they said, we need more characters on shelf. And Mattel said, oh, great, we'll get like Scareglow and Randor and Ninjor. We'll pump out more characters for you. After they hit the shelf, we was like, no, that's not what we meant. We meant we need more He-Man, Skeletor, Teela, Man-at-Arms, and Trapjaw. Like characters that people actually know. That's what killed the line. I mean, just literally that one thing. I think if they had shipped like a best of wave in Christmas of '86, He-Man probably would not have died.
Well, outside of He-Man and Skeletor, and then to a later extent Hordak, they were really good at reusing parts, but they weren't really reusing characters. You got one Man-at-Arms, and that was it. That's all you had. You had one Teela, and that's it. You know, whether or not they were available on the shelves later on, re-released, they didn't change them up. In fact, I don't recall if people like Man-at-Arms or Teela were ever re-released other than that initial wave. I definitely didn't see them again, only, you know, just when I got one, you know. And as a kid, you don't know that, you know, waves are, you know, a thing. You just think that, oh, this is a character I want. I'm going to go out and try and find it, whether or not it's been out for a year and a half or whatever. But I think if we're talking about whether or not the wave would succeed, I think the movie itself had to succeed. And in order for the movie itself to have succeeded, it probably had to have come out, you know, maybe even 2 years before that, to fully maximize the people that were into He-Man at that time. I mean, we were close enough in age to appreciate that a movie was coming out, but we're starting to, you know, even age out of it ourselves.
Oh, I mean, they missed. I mean, it should have come out in '85. Basically, was when the peak of He-Man's popularity. And you know, a lot of people don't like to talk about it, but She-Ra really did lead to a lot of the downfall of He-Man, because boys were seeing it as, oh, now it's a girl show. Like, you know, that He-Man shows up on everyone. Like, He-Man's basically been reduced to being a guest star. Personally, I like the She-Ra show better than He-Man, and I like
it's a better show.
Yeah, it's
right.
But yeah, between demasculating He-Man by basically making his sister the star, and the movie not performing, and yeah, as you said, you were getting older. The He-Man line 82 to 86 kind of represents two generations of children. So the first generation had already grown out of it, and it's always interesting. Like Pixel Dan, I'm sure you know him or have heard of him. Like he's a big fan of Mosquitor. He's a couple years younger than me, and yeah, he came into the line later, you know, in like 85, 86, which is why a character like Mosquitor is huge for him, whereas I was older and I had the 82 line. So for me, it was He-Man, Teela, and Man-at-Arms. I never even had Mosquitor or even heard of him till I was an adult. So
Well, it's interesting you say that it was from two different generations, because I was born in 81, so I wasn't really toy cognizant until like 84, 85, where I was like choosing the toys I wanted to play with. So I remember my first one being a Battle Armor He-Man, but it was on sale, so it was like at the end of the Battle Armor run before the next guys came out. But all my original Wave guys I got at yard sales, and the characters I got new, like Snout Spout and Scareglow and stuff, I got them new at retail. So it wasn't like I was buying old toys at a yard sale from a line that was gone and forever. It was the same line, but there was two different, like I said, different generations happening, where you could buy used old ones from the guy down the road who outgrew it, but also get the new in the store at the same time.
And yeah, and then the lack of having those characters in store for a new, you know, it's like you buy Ninja Turtle characters, you're always going to be able to find the 4 Ninja Turtles. But yeah, by the time 87 rolled around, like, yeah, you could buy like Dragon Blaster Skeletor and Terror Claw, or I'm mixing them up. I'm going to lose my He-Man license. Why am I blanking on Pardon, Flying Fists. Thank you. I'm like blanking on the final variant of He-Man. Well, actually, Laser Light would be the final variant. But yeah, the point is, the variants got farther and farther from the iconic version from the show. And
it's the thing. So I got Flying Fist He-Man for Christmas. I had Battle Armor He-Man. I got Flying Fist He-Man, and it drove me crazy that he didn't have a power sword. So he was almost, as a toy, I'm like, he can't do the thing that he's supposed to do.
No, that's what you said is so important, and that is exactly it. Is the magic of He-Man, which was popularized by the Filmation transformation. I mean, that was the core of it. Was it's aspirational instant transformation, being able to go from, you know, a skinny little kid to a huge muscle-bound Arnold Schwarzenegger. That's the core of what's the emotional connection the kids have to the brand. And yeah, it's like when you can't get those characters and recreate that moment, like the brand moved on and it was mishandled.
It's funny when you think about it and you talk about the price of tooling and sculpting and everything in your videos a lot. The cost of making laser light and laser power He-Man and Skeletor with that gimmick and their whole new bodies and their whole new construction must have been astronomical compared to just reissuing the first figures again.
Or look at Eternia, like all that stuff for the 87 line. They're tooling up all of this ridiculous amount of stuff, and it's like all retail wanted was just reissue the same figure again, and that's like the cheapest, easiest thing to do.
So Xazyl, you're a big fan of the movie. Watch it all the time, playing with your figures. The glaring problems that we talked about with the movie was that He-Man didn't look the same as regular He-Man. He didn't look like him. There was no Battle Cat, and there's no Orko, and there's no Atom transformation. Those are like the four things that people are like, this is why, I think we can universally agree that Frank Langella as Skeletor killed it and was brilliant.
Yeah, I think it was cast. I think it was cast well. I don't have an issue with any of the actors per se, but I think the same thing goes for when you saw Ninja Turtles. I think the same thing when you saw Super Mario. It strays so far from what made it work. But you try and reconcile that in your brain. It's like, okay, this is a different interpretation of it. I had no idea that the Ninja Turtles movie was more closely based on the original comic because I was reading Archie comics and watching the cartoon. I didn't know there was a darker, grittier side to it, so I was very surprised. I think for He-Man, I think we'd already accepted that the comic originally was pretty far out compared to the cartoon. And so for me, the movie was like, all right, this is just a different interpretation now. The only real issue I had with the movie, outside of the fact that He-Man's sporting a gun, which I thought was a little bit out there, was that they spent way too much time on Earth. It was like, no, there's so much cooler things happening on Eternia. I'm already living on Earth. I don't need to see any more of this, thanks. Just take me where you guys are.
Well, and that's exactly why the new movie's struggling, because that's expensive.
Right.
It's expensive to take you to Eternia.
I think, so speaking of the new movie, so I don't know if you know this about me, Scott. Probably not. My favorite movie of all time is The Beastmaster. I think that movie is paced properly and like the action's great. I love The Beastmaster. I think that's how you make a He-Man movie, is you make like an 80s style barbarian movie shot like in the wilderness that can be any planet, right? Like, I don't think it needs to be a multi-billion-dollar CGI world that they build. Like, if you look at Conan the Barbarian, they with matte paintings and a couple of sets they built out in the wild, like that movie looks fantastic and looks fantastic today.
Look at Star Wars. Most of that movie's out in the desert, and we still love it.
Beastmaster is often people refer to that as a He-Man movie. Like they say, like that feels like what a He-Man movie would be. Even with the, he's even got the Panther walking, just make the Panther clean, and like it's practically a He-Man movie. So I'm totally with you. It could be done. Yeah. It's just that it's complicated.
Yeah, but I think get studios involved. I think there needs to be a certain big price tag to make it like sellable, right? They can't say we're making a low budget He-Man movie and Mattel's not going to be like, that's a great idea.
And they're gonna, well, and it's got to appeal to more than just the super fans. Like we'll show up and we'll contribute $50 to $75 million, but beyond that, anything else in the box office has to come from regular mainstream, people watching the movie. So
right. So if in the toys, like let's in a fantasy world where they do the movie Grayskull and whatnot, I always thought it would have been a genius idea, like in the mini comics, to explain the gap between the toy or the cartoon and the movie. So you say like, here's where Orko and Cringer went. They're on a side adventure during the movie, because the movie doesn't tell the origin story like most hero movies do, right? So like you watch Superman or Batman, like origin, our character became its thing, and here's his first adventure. where He-Man just throws you right into the world. Skeletor finally takes over Grayskull, so it's like it almost happens after filmation. It's like a continuation of that. And I think they could have easily said, here's why He-Man looks differently. He got new armor when the Sorceress got captured, and Orko and Cringer are in the dungeons of Grayskull, need to be rescued. I think that could have been explained out, and then our kid minds would have said, like, okay, that all makes sense, and it locks together, as opposed to this is why it's different.
And I think they were too busy running around in panic mode at that point.
Right. Yeah.
They knew, they knew at the, even while shooting that, the line was tanking, and because at first Mattel was completely hands off, then they were like super hands on, then they were giving them, they were telling Gary, He-Man can't actually hit anyone with a sword or punch anyone. And then they would look at, last month's sales. No, He-Man can punch everybody. Do whatever you need to do. It was literally like that, like Mattel having completely black and white opposite direction as they were watching the ship sink. So you're hoping that this was going to be the raft, but it wasn't.
And that's why they gave him the gun, because he couldn't use the sword as a weapon.
Yeah, originally, yeah. Like the edicts from Mattel were, he can't use a sword. He-Man can't use a sword. He can't actually punch anyone.
Right.
He can't kill any existing characters. So that's why they created Sorod, and all the those characters were created to be killed off because they weren't allowed to kill off Trapjaw.
Right.
So, or Triclops. So Triclops became Blade.
Why did they kill off the best looking character in the movie? Like
Sorod?
Salrod design, he looked so great.
They were all designed to be killed. They were red shirts because they didn't want them. Yeah, it's crazy. Like Trapjaw doesn't even show up, let alone not get killed. They just it made no sense.
I'm saying, if you look at the characters they made, which are Salrod, Blade, and Krag, why not kill Krag? That guy is terrible to look at.
And then Gwildor's got Kentucky Fried Chicken, and He-Man's driving around in a pink Cadillac. I mean, these kind of decisions are just you boggles the mind. 30 years later, like, what were they thinking? But
it's funny what sticks with you whenever, so about once a year we'll get a bucket of KFC, and then I remember why I don't do KFC more than that. But whenever I'm eating it, I always at the end like, it tasted good. Huh? I've always thrown that line out.
I'm enjoying this.
Yeah, and it's like, well, why did they put the meat on these little white sticks? I pull that out all the time as like a throwaway at that dinner comment. And you said it. You walked out of the movie and you're like, that wasn't He-Man. But I guess I was a little younger than you. So in my mind, I was like, I need to make it work because I know I need to love that. Because there's a certain time when you can say, like, hey, that movie wasn't good. Because at a certain age, like, it's a movie. It's got to be good. Like, it's a movie. That's your bar. But, you can start saying, like, that wasn't good.
Well, I think that's kind of how a lot of us felt, like with some of the recent Star Wars and Indiana Jones movies. It's like, we love these products. Like, I wanted to love Crystal Skull and Last Jedi and all of that shebang, and I don't. Some of it I outright detest. And it's like, the same thing with the He-Man movie. We all wanted to love it.
Yeah, well, I think too, especially to follow your train of thought to episode 7, like, we went and saw episode 7 in the theater, and I came out and I was like, I think I really liked that movie, but I don't know. Like, it made me watching Star Wars again. And you're like, I think there was parts about that I really liked, but I don't know. And then when Last Jedi came out, you're like, I don't like either of them. Like, almost like Last Jedi ruined the previous movie as well.
And then, like, in episode 7, that was the one that I worked on that in Rogue One. So I was actually right in the trenches, and thought that I was buying the what they were selling. I was just not smoking the crack, but you know what I mean. And I was all like, oh my god, this is going to be. And then then it came out, and I remember walking out of the theater, like we got to go to a screening with Jack Specific, like all the people who worked on the Big Figs line, and I went out of the theater like, that was horrible. What did they do to Star Wars? Like, And I saw
Right?
Phantom Menace like 6 times in the theaters, trying to hope it would get good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's funny, and that always kind of sticks with us. So we just went and saw, me and my buddies went and saw the Ninja Turtles movie on the weekend, the Mutant Mayhem one, and we walked out, and we just all were like, I'm happy we didn't take our kids to, like, it was just such a depressing feeling, being like, that wasn't what I loved, and so it goes to another point, which we've kind of talked about before, Scott, is that everything that comes out now, and Xazyl, you and I have talked about this as well, is a reissue of something. Like it's a retelling of a story, and it's a double-edged sword, because to tell a story that you already know, but you want to see another version of it, has to be different. But if it's different, it's not what I love.
It completely, yeah. And everyone's so scared to bet on an unknown property that they, so Ghostbusters 12, Star Wars 19, just keep making. And my bigger issue is it dilutes, I feel like, the original properties. Like,
yes,
I mean, the last indie movie, the Dial of Destiny, my friend Chris actually fell asleep. And I was bored. I'm bored at an Indiana Jones movie. I'm like a huge Indiana Jones fan.
Right.
So it's like, yeah, when there were 3 Indiana Jones movies, that was like a crown jewel. And now there's 5 movies. 2 of them suck. Go ahead.
Scott, you're not wrong, because you can't watch the end of Return of the Jedi now without feeling a little bit of sadness, because you know where that story now goes. Well, that was a perfect ending in Return of the Jedi, because they're all celebrating, whether you like Return of the Jedi or not. Return of the Jedi used to be known as the worst Star Wars, even though I never had an issue with Return of the Jedi. But if that was the worst Star Wars, it was still pretty good. And you see that celebration scene, you see everyone at the end just sitting all happy together, celebrating, Lando Calrissian giving his best claps, and the Force ghosts, looking on and going, okay, we're at peace now. But then the rest of the movies came out. It's like, oh, this is just so depressing. It does take away those the feelings that you did have for those movies. It taints them.
And it's, as you were saying, how they keep making the same stuff over and over again. It's one of the reasons that I like a lot of classic book series, like the Horatio Hornblower and Sherlock Holmes, because that's a finite, like there's other people but no one accepts anything but like the original authors, that is the canon. Right. So yeah, it's like, I tend to apply that to kind of things like Star Wars. And I look at, okay, well, once the original owner, George Lucas, sold it, or not, not die, like either the original author either dies or sells it. Not that I'm wishing George Lucas anything, but just meaning that's the moment that, to me, canon gets cut off. So I look at the Disney movies as big budget fan films.
That's all.
Like, they basically loved Star Wars enough that they wanted to buy it and hire all the original actors and move them around like marionettes and sometimes CGI puppets. Like, great, you can do whatever you want with your money, but I don't have to accept that as, canon.
Right.
True.
Yeah, no, it's funny how people want to put their own stamp on stuff as opposed to just telling the story that we know and love. So, like, to go back to He-Man and that movie that came out, I understand they couldn't do Orko, like they couldn't show him on the screen, they couldn't do Battle Cat, and even the Atom transformation they probably couldn't do well. But it almost seemed like they were trying to reimagine it and make it its own thing. When you walked out, you're like, that wasn't the He-Man that I liked. It would have almost been easier to be simpler. Like, just the work is done for you, right? Like, it's right there. Just go do it, right? One of my favorite comic book movies is Robert Rodriguez and we needed Frank Miller's Sin City, because it's almost like a shot for shot just telling of the comic book, and I'm like, this works because this was a good comic book,
right?
Well, perfect point. It's like when you're adapting something, like when you're adapting Tale of Two Cities, you don't wind up saying, oh, like, well, let's reimagine this with cyborg aliens and all sorts of stuff. You do Tale of Two Cities, you do Dickens. But with comic books and sci-fi, it's like Hollywood's like, oh, I'm going to make my own vision of this. You know, it's like
Right.
you don't see that with. It's like I don't get what's one of the reasons that I love that the new Marvel movies are very, or at least try to be accurate to the source material. Everything that went the Super Mario Brothers movie, the whole thing where the studio wanted to turn it into like Peach's woke adventure, and Nintendo Japan, America held the line. We're like, no, the brand is called Super Mario Brothers. And look, it did great. It basically it delivered, like, versus if you compare that to the 87 Mario movie, that did exactly that. That went off in its own direction, its own adaptation. But when you stick to the source material, like they did in the new Super Mario Brother animated, it's the highest grossing movie of the year.
Right.
It delivered.
It does what it says it's going to do. Yeah. My favorite thing about the old Super Mario Brothers movies was their jumping boots were they were reused in the movie Face Off as the prison boots.
Right.
They're the exact same props.
Oh, I love prop reuse. I mean, I actually did a whole video on Star Wars on prop reuse. Like, there's Bo Sheck wearing like Planet of the Apes like uniforms and stuff. Yeah, there's all sorts of things.
I watched your video and because I like your stuff. And I knew most of those, but the one I didn't know, which is one I should have known, was Obi-Wan's chest was the kryptonite box in Superman.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Superman.
I did not know.
Yeah, so Superman's like one of my all-time absolute favorite movies. Like it's up there. I have a autographed Margot Kidder Superman the movie poster in my hallway of my house, as I love it. I didn't know that, and I was like, this is great. So that was a thank you for that moment.
If I can contribute one additional fact that people didn't know before, then I feel I did my I'm probably going to run in like 5 minutes or so.
Okay, beautiful. So then tell me, Scott, you got 5 minutes. You can go back to the 87 and you can change one thing about the 87 line. You can add one figure, take one away, do one thing differently. What would you do to the 87 line to make it more successful?
I mean, I would have just put out a He-Man figure. Just
put out a He-Man figure.
Normal Filmation He-Man, yeah.
Just put it out. That solves the problem.
It really kind of does.
Isn't it crazy that is how simple it would have been to just give us one figure?
I mean, yeah, and it's scary because MOTU is probably the line that had like the biggest fall of all time. I mean, Turtles has been like, up and down, and Transformers, even Star Wars has been delisted. But MOTU was outselling Barbie and Hot Wheels and Star everything, and it just crashed.
Crashed.
Yeah.
Well, too bad we don't have that time machine. But thank you for bringing it back with classics when you did that, and that was a huge deal. Bringing back what we love, and thanks for being on here and talking MOTU with us tonight.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm sorry that I had to run after about 40 minutes here, but happy to jump back on anytime.
No problem. We'd love to have you. You have a great night, and Xazyl and I will keep talking.
All right. I will publish. I look forward to hearing the rest of the conversation.
All right. That was nice to have Scott join us for a bit. Xazyl, how are you doing, my friend?
Yeah, good, mate. Good. I need to turn the fan on in here, I reckon. It's getting a bit warm in this, what looks like the internal microwave.
Well, you've got a big fan right here, so I think you're going to be okay.
Oh, I'll be all right then. I'll just chill. Yeah. You know what? I'll say this about the movie. I think that they were smart by making it so that when the movie kicks off, there's no need for a transformation from Prince Adam to He-Man because he doesn't have an opportunity to ever not be He-Man.
Right.
And he's already in the thick of it, so he's already He-Man. So, it takes away the necessity for that, but it still gives you the iconic lifting up the sword and saying, by the power of Grayskull, I have the power.
I think the things that we complain about in the movie are so easily fixable in like a dialogue crawl.
Well, they have a semblance of some little bit of history at the beginning, but nothing that a crawl couldn't have fixed. In fact, I think that your idea of saying that some of the characters we already know are off doing something else, like part of that battle that He-Man was coming out of,
Right.
they could already be still in the thick of that battle or whatever is happening off screen. But also, I think that bringing in new characters is also part of what makes He-Man and the Masters of the Universe work so well, because they are always bringing out new characters.
Absolutely.
So for me, I really I was an Orko fan, and I'm not ashamed to say so. And Gwildor, I think, came into my collection because it was okay that he had a different style of body, right? If there's a purpose for it, then I accepted that. Ram Man, I accept that, he has a purpose. Orko, I accept that that's a purpose for that different style of body. But for the other two characters, it felt like too much of a departure of the style of He-Man that I was used to. So, and I thought Gwildor was funny in the movie, like funny enough for me as a kid to enjoy his antics. Yeah, I didn't have. Yeah, and he doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be Orko. It doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be a dumbed down or CG non-reliant version of Orko. It can be its own character. These new characters can exist in the same world.
So we got something here from my man Dale. And
Oh,
he's saying
Dale.
Did anybody know when they made the Masters of the Universe that they talked about a sequel, but they weren't able to, so they came out with Van Damme's movie Cyborg? And yes, I'll often watch Masters of the Universe and then Cyborg, and kind of look for some similarities. But yeah, that was supposed to be Masters of the Universe 2, and there's actually pictures of the script that say Masters of the Universe 2 Cyborg on it, and
Right.
the main villain wears a lot of Blade's outfit.
Huh.
Yeah.
Well, I haven't seen Cyborg in so long. In fact, I haven't seen it since I found out that it was supposed to be a rework of the Masters of the Universe script. So I really should go back and check it out with that in mind.
Yeah, it's still a trip. It's still like a canon movie. It's
Yeah. I just don't know if I can invest that amount of time in Cyborg at this stage of my life. Okay. Do I have that kind of time? I don't know.
It'll be our next watch along. It'll be well worth it.
Okay.
But no, I think you're right. If they would have used just the regular human body for Blade, and if they would have used the lizard body for Salrod, we would have bought in. Like, we would have been in, no problem. And again, it would have saved so much money for Mattel.
I think so too. I don't know. Like, obviously, they strayed from formula when they went to the New Adventures, and maybe that was dipping a toe into new, simpler designs that didn't require plastic or rubber internal parts to keep everything attached. As a kid, I'm not looking at that stuff. I'm not looking at how to make something. I just know what I like and why I like it, and so. They all seem, as an adult, it's like, okay, cool, maybe it was for whatever reason they did it for business side of it. Well, fine, I can deal with that. But as a kid, I don't care. I want a toy. Gimmicks like sparks, that's not enough to get me.
Yeah, spikes make you just go the other way.
Yeah.
What is this here? Yeah, the movie hit the wall. People were mad about it at the time. Yeah, it was a different received thing. But a question for you, Xazyl. I'm just going to grab He-Man over here.
Yeah.
Grab a prop. So if this He-Man came out in '87,
yep.
Is he close enough to the original He-Man that you're happy as a kid, or do you want the Filmation He-Man?
No, well, if that had come out, I was already by that stage. I think Thunder Punch He-Man had hit the top tier of my collection of who I represented as He-Man in my collection. So I was all for new designs. And if they brought out a classic design He-Man that was a representation of the movie, I'd have been all for that. I'd have been like, cool. It's we had already seen He-Man change his outfits on more than one occasion. And this would have been one of those ones where I was like, so long as he comes with a sword, because I know Flying Fist. I'm with you there, man. It's not even a great gimmick, At least give him a pack-in sword, If you want to have the gimmick, fine, but at least give him a packing sword.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think that if they would have released this He-Man, and then even if they just recolored Man-at-Arms gray instead of green, right?
Right.
Like some metallic armor. Same thing with Tila. Give her kind of a movie suit repaint.
Yeah.
I think we're there. Like I think that's all we really needed to give. And you get your He-Man, you get your Man-at-Arms, you get your Skeletor, and you're off.
Yeah, you don't need to have it exact to the movie style. So you can re-release Man-at-Arms. You can change up his armor if you want to, but you can keep the same premise. The fact that they never brought out Man-at-Arms or Tila in any other fashion is a surprise to me. And when I say I'm not sure if they re-released those characters later on, is only because I got Man-at-Arms later. I'd already had a considerable amount of He-Man toys. I'm sure Man-at-Arms must have been off the shelves by the time I got one. And so how I got one, I don't know. My granddad was able to get one for me, but I'm sure that initial wave was already done and dusted by that stage.
Yeah, it could have been backlog stock or something at a discount store or whatnot. But yeah, it seems like a no-brainer. Now it's funny that Laser Light and Laser Power Skeletor were supposed to be the movie versions of them, because I think they look as far away from the movie as any version of He-Man I've ever seen. But they're just so bad.
Well, I think you're looking at, so the gimmick, they started to lean very heavy into gimmicks. They had to, was it what was that?
They want to know if you've seen the new movies.
No, I don't tend to upset myself intentionally. I'll have to accidentally stumble across that one. Let me know if it's any good though. Adam, I know you didn't like it.
Yeah.
But they start to lean heavy into these gimmicks, and they take away what we loved about it, right? He-Man doesn't need a laser sword. He-Man's got his own iconic sword. Giving him anything other than his iconic sword is it's detrimental to that action figure, because the opening cartoon that you will see at every episode was that he would hold aloft that mighty sword and say the magic words. And sometimes in the episode you see him do it, up to 2 or more times. We'll have to do a watch along where we count the most times he transforms into He-Man in a single episode. But
yes.
It's I like that your movie your movie version has its own sword, but I'd still think that even if they brought out a movie version back then, I would have preferred just a classic power sword with it.
Regular sword, yeah. And that's what I tried to do with my movie version Skeletor, where he would fill the role of a vintage Skeletor if you didn't have one. He could be just a regular movie Skeletor, or he could be like the Golden God one. He kind of fits all three because he's a little bit different, but he works, right? So that was kind of the method behind that guy. So it's like you don't look at him and say like, oh, that's Skeletor from the movie, but he can be there. But I think he looks way more like the movie Skeletor than Laser Power Skeletor.
So if you were a kid that was introduced to He-Man and the Masters of the Universe through that movie, which I'm sure somebody somewhere was, right?
Yeah.
Somewhere in the world, somebody was first introduced to He-Man via that movie. And then to think, wow, I want to play He-Man now, to go out to the stores and not be able to find a He-Man? Doesn't that seem tragic?
It seems very, very sad. Very, very, very sad. Right. And again, now I am a nostalgia junkie, as you know, and probably are as well. But I watch this movie maybe more than I should. I watch every Christmas Eve after the kids go to bed. I crack this movie on. It's great. It's great nostalgia for me. But I think it works as an 80s fantasy movie, just on its own. Like people we like to call down like the problem with it, but like it's kind of a fun movie to watch.
So I adopted last year, so I can't really say it's a habit yet because I only did it once. But I adopted that the viewing of Masters of the Universe just before Christmas last year, and I intend to do it again this year. But the movie itself, if you don't have any attachment to it through nostalgia, it's not a bad movie. I could do without as a He-Man movie, I could do without the Earth stuff. But as a Duck Out of Water movie, where they're people from another planet come to our planet and try to figure out what chicken is, what a cow is, that's pretty funny.
It's good stuff. And now I'm going to say I didn't mind the Earth stuff so much because whenever I played He-Mans, they were always on Earth, like they were in my backyard.
Well, that's true. That's true.
There
was a connection to Earth, obviously, through the Queen. But yeah, I don't know. I've always sort of felt that I don't know, that part for me was when I would start to tune out. It's like when Star Trek went back in time and they came down to modern Earth. It's got some humor in it, but I want to see them out on the Enterprise. I want to see them taking off into space.
Right.
I did
like the whales movie though, where they went back and took the whales.
Yeah. That's the one.
All right, so it looks like people are wanting in on a watch along here.
Done. You're in, guys.
We should probably do maybe a Slaughterhouse members night watch along of the MOTU movie. That might be.
I'm sold.
So you're in.
Sold. I'm in.
I'll watch any movie with the great Billy Barty. It was
true.
Great. Yeah.
I can't think of one bad movie that he was in.
I can only think of two that he was though. So.
And both are very good.
Great. Now the only regret now watching my video tonight that I have is that I didn't get a janky Sorceress and Painter White, because the white version of the Sorceress that came out with the Castle Grayskull Origins would have been a perfect way to do a movie version of Sorceress as well.
That's all you had to do. The fact that Mattel were known for reusing molds, to create new characters, you would think, why don't we reuse those molds as the characters they were intended to be? So bring back the Sorceress in that movie colors. Bring back Man-at-Arms. Bring back Teela. Beastman. Throw him back in the mix. And then
like just do Mossman in brown flock.
Genius, Adam. Genius.
Right.
Where's the doll when you need it?
Origins right now. They should be listening to us.
That is a killer idea. Flock Beastman, but in brown. Yeah, right. Yeah.
And then give him. He had a cool sword in that movie too. And he got bleach in the eye.
Yeah.
That's the way to do it.
I thought the costumes were very good. I thought the designs were great. The design of the castle, even though you only just see it for a moment, and it's a painting, amazing. It looks great. It's obviously not the cartoon castle, but damn, it looks great.
So I was going through footage trying to find clips for my video when to put them in, and just Skeletor's costume, the stuff that they didn't need to do that they did, like his stuff on his arms that's like lighting up. When they didn't need to have that, we were okay with it not lighting up. The detail that was in there was unreal, right? And even like if you watch the first scene where Skeletor's walking in, that big long walk down, behind him there's a dragon painting on the wall of Grayskull, this huge dragon mural. That's the chest plate that's in He-Man's armor.
Oh, cool. Okay, I'll look out for that in my next watch.
They took it there and put it there. So like there was attention to detail. It wasn't just thrown together, right? It was they were going for it. So
I like that Frank is enjoying the role of Skeletor. Right, you can tell that he's really getting into it, and the same goes for when you're watching the Street Fighter movie with M. Bison. When you really get into the role and you just enjoy it for what it is, it sells the character, and that elevates it, from what, potentially could be, disastrous representation of the character, turns it into something memorable.
Well, I would say everybody here showed up to work, right? Like Meg Foster as Evil-Lyn, did like no one's right. Like they're all trying their best. Like Dolph Lundgren learned English for this movie.
Right.
My favorite story about the movie is Stallone showed up on the set to see what was going on, and he had Dolph there. So Dolph was just in Rocky IV with him, and they saw him acting, and they were filming stuff. And he said to their director, he says to Gary Goddard, he goes, "You giving this guy lines?"
That's great.
Which I thought was great. But no, it's like these guys showed up and they acted and they tried to tell you a story, and like it works for me. I don't. It's nostalgia, but it's also like that's what an '80s movie was, right? Like it hit all the marks. Like it did a good job of being what it's supposed to be. It just no. Stallone saying that is hilarious. It is. You just got that. But no, so I'm all for it, and I think a young me would have doubled down for like a movie Grayskull, and a movie like the Grayskull I made in the video today was the Castle Grayskull I always wanted as a kid, right? I was like,
right,
because we looked at I mentioned it in my video a little bit, the gimmicks and stuff that make the toy iconic never happened in the show. Like you never saw that throne, you never saw the elevator. Like no one got an elevator in Castle Grayskull. Right? That never happened. There was ever a rug with an eyeball on it. Like it was everything. There was never any laser guns on top. It was they took the visual of the outside of Castle Grayskull, and then they just made that what happened inside. Like it was all kind of the stone, just a stone cavern, right?
So I think the movie could have worked more so if it was the final chapter in Masters of the Universe. So the cartoon that we'd all come to love. This is how it ended. This is how it officially ends with this one final battle for Castle Grayskull. And I think if you have that in mind, it actually does work. It does work like that. The human characters, give or take them, but I can't remember their names. Courtney Cox and the other guy.
Yeah, the guy in the band with the Japanese
synthesizer guy. I don't think they sold any synthesizers from this movie, but
they didn't. So if you're gonna do a top 3 moments in the movie, what would it be?
I think the annihilation of Sauron, that leaves an imprint in your head. He doesn't just die; he gets eviscerated. Evaporated. You gotta keep him evaporated. Then I would say the opening shot of Castle Grayskull. That is in there, and then. I mean, for me, it's got to be the very, very end where Skeletor comes back out of that liquid goo and says he'll be back. But there's so many other cool moments, but those 3 for me, I reckon. Yeah.
So for me, it's the laser whip scene. Like to me, as a kid, I was like, that is the coolest thing I've ever seen. So that was really cool. So it's funny. One of my favorite things as a kid I've learned was like the worst part of the movie. So their final fight, where it's like in a dark room, you can't really see what's going on, was filmed in a day because they had no budget left. They had no money left. They just went and filmed it with no lights or anything. But I thought it was like, as a kid, I was like, this is a cool battle. Like it looks great. Like I was all excited about it. So that was my But as an adult watching, my favorite moment is when Gwildor locks his door. He has like 8 very futuristic locks, like and he's like. And then he has a little like $2 thing at the top. It's like a prop from Hollywood. And I was like,
I enjoy all of his scenes. All of his scenes are great. It's just so great when he's talking to the cow. He lifts up his ear. Moo. It's just like, come on, that's good stuff.
When he licks his lips when he's going and he's trying to get the graphic. I'm like, I'm in all day long with this guy. Yeah. I'm in.
I would have watched a show of just that guy, just the Gwildor show.
Yeah, but they did do some like other stuff very, very well. That like when they put the collar on to whatever his name was, and he talked with that like different like that different tone.
Yeah.
That was like freaky and surreal to me. Like that was really cool, right? And then even the laser blast on Courtney Cox, the wound looked crazy, unlike any wound I've seen. Right? They did a good job with that. And I'll even say like Skeletor coming out of the portal with all his guys.
Yes.
Look great.
And the score is very good as well.
Yeah.
You know, did they ever release that as an album? As a score album?
I don't know if they released
soundtrack
an album. I don't know if they did or not, but they should. But whenever I use that score in one of my videos, people always comment, "Is this the Christopher Reeve theme?" And I was like, "No, it's not Christopher Reeve. It just sounds like it because it's that good." But
yeah. If they have that, that's a good score. I'd like to see if the soundtrack was available.
Yeah, no, and I think if this movie comes out, the opposite of what you said, if it was like, this is how we're going to kick off He-Man and we're going to start the lore with this, and this is what we're going to base the figures on, I think it would have worked as well. Like I think it's only doesn't work because it's so different than what we thought we wanted.
Right. Yeah. So do you think that if this kicked off Masters of the Universe, it would have worked?
I think so. Yeah. I think so.
Yeah, I get.
Because again, I love that you're just thrown into the world. Like you should know what's going on. Yeah. Here it is. And I'm on the Movies, Films, and Flicks podcast a lot, and what I always say to Mark there is, tell me the rules, and I'll follow any story. Like it doesn't make sense. When you tell me it's a rule, I'm in. Like it's a rule. Mm-hmm. So you just But when you go into worlds that are already made up, so like when you watch Mad Max Fury Road and they spray paint their face gold and they say shiny, I'm like, I don't know where that came from, but that's what they're doing, so I get it. I'm in. Like that's
what they do. Yeah.
Like just throw me into your world and I'll get there. So I love that about this movie. Just kind of threw you in, and they expected all the kids to know who He-Man was, but everybody else just on for a ride.
There's nothing more annoying in a movie than someone explaining something to the audience that both people already know in that universe.
Right.
It's like, why you wouldn't say that in a regular conversation. You'd be like, yeah, I know this like you know it. Why are you telling me this again?
Exactly. But anyways, we just reached the hour mark, Xazyl. I don't want to keep you because I know our times are different. But thank you for coming on. And yeah, exactly. Exposition. We got to get that exposition out of there. Thank you for. I wanted this Grayskull video has been a big thing for me for a while. I've been working on it, and so I wanted to celebrate it with you. And so I thank you for that. And we will talk very soon. I
do want to say, if anybody in the chat hasn't seen the video that came out directly before this live stream, go back and check it out. Even if you have seen it, go and check it out again. It is magic that happens right before your eyes. What I love about a Go Figure video, Adam, is that it kicks off with that brilliant theme and then launches you into the magic that is whatever it is that you do to create what you do. And I've been blessed enough to see it in real life, in real time. And so, but it still never ceases to amaze me what you're able to come up with. So thanks for having me on the show, Ad. I call you Ad now because I really like it. But yeah, thanks, man. It's good to see you again.
It's good to see you. Thanks, everybody in the chat, and we'll see you on the next trip.